Now we're actually going to follow John Tillman's admonition and actually move beyond the discussion here about policy and actually talk about people. As Joanna mentioned, we have a few members in the audience here that have had a direct impact themselves and can speak to us about how the tort system has left them short. I want to have Jennifer Shiver. Please come up, Jennifer. And Jennifer's going to pass along her story to you. And again, add further credence to why we need to go about fixing the tort system here at the state level. Thank you, Jennifer.
Hello. My husband died 10 years ago this week. His name was Mike Butler, and he was one of the first people to have the gastric bypass surgery. Everything that could go wrong went wrong, and we were in the hospital around 3 weeks. During that time, there were a lot of areas of his care that I questioned, but I thought if I was really nice to the doctor and the nurses, he would get better care. But everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and he passed away. I wanted to hold someone accountable. I was just angry. It's not about money at that point or wondering what you're going to get, but you're looking for answers. So I went to the hospital, and I spent around $1,300. I got all of Mike's medical records and his x-rays and reviewed them myself, and obviously I don't understand a lot of it, but trying to put the pieces together and get an explanation for my children of where this had gone wrong. As a part of the process, I had 2 children to raise, so I'm going to find a reputable law firm in Atlanta to represent me, not someone who chases ambulances, but a reputable firm. So I took all of this data that I had paid for and all of my notes to a firm. They put it with their legal expert to review, and I can't talk to their legal expert and tell them what I know or what I felt because, you know, in case they were to accept the case and it go to trial, I don't know who their expert is. In one case, one of the attorneys I talked to, I went to 3 firms, told me he used a nurse to screen his cases. In all 3 attempts to get that, hold someone accountable to make a change in how Mike was treated and how future patients may be treated, I was turned away because the award would not be enough. One attorney said to me I would go bankrupt if I took your case. I've not tried one of these before. It's new. So my time limit ran out, and that was all over. But through a part of the process, my husband had a connection to NBC, and this ended up being a national news story of trying to not hold my surgeon accountable for what had happened to my husband, but to tell what could go wrong to a regular guy. And so as a part of that process, everything that I said that was going to be on national television had to be vetted, and it had to be proved. And I had to show this is where it says it in the medical record. This is proof. And everything was screened because they couldn't take the risk of me saying something on national television that was incorrect or an embarrassment. So as a part of that process, and I finally got called and told when this special would air, Al Roker came to my house to report on it because he had the surgery too, and he wanted to tell the story of what could go wrong. My house was never cleaner than that day. But as a part of all of that, when the producer called me a couple of months to give me the night that it was going to air, and it was unknown to me, but NBC had also had it screened by a group of medical experts. And she said, all they want to say to you is they hope you got a lot of money. Well, I didn't. But it was really, I would say from a patient's perspective, not about the amount of money. It was about holding someone accountable and affecting change. Now, my son that has a lot of student loan debt would probably argue that right now, that it may be a little bit about the money. But nothing, you know, I've been honored to be able to tell Mike's story to see what we can do and where we can change to make things better. And I would almost guarantee that his surgeon, if he was here today, would be saying the same thing. So thank you for listening to me and letting me continue to honor my husband by telling his story. Thanks.
You know, the Institute of Medicine deaths in hospitals each year from errors, and 6,000 deaths from medication errors, and thousands of others. And as John Tillman said, I want to tell you a story about one of those 100,000 people. one of the stories behind those statistics. Healthcare is complicated, and there's a lot of issues involved, as you heard even from Jennifer, so I want to just hit some of the highlights. Bobby Hodges, my mother-in-law, was in an auto accident in Duluth, Georgia, up on Pleasant Hill Road a few years ago. She broke her ribs, had a bad injury on her knee. She was wearing a seat belt, but still the impact was pretty significant and caused some of those issues. She was treated in the hospital, released about a week later, was at home recovering. Her knee got worse. While she had the pain for her broken ribs, her knee seemed to be swelling. On a Friday, my wife took her to the doctor. The doctor wasn't there, but the nurse practitioner was seeing her, and my wife's family's had problems in the past with blood clots. It's always been a big concern. And so as the knee was swelling and painful, my mother-in-law said, well, I'm afraid I might have a blood clot. And my wife said, yeah, that's something we've all been concerned about. So she said to the nurse, we need to have a test for that. I think it's called a Doppler. I'm not a doctor, but there's a test to find out if the blood clots are there. And the nurse said, no, you don't need that. You don't need a blood clot test. And he said, no, we need to schedule it tomorrow, Saturday, but it's weekend, but fine, let's get it scheduled. And the nurse said, no, you don't need it. The nurse said, I can go to bed tonight telling you that advice. I will sleep well tonight knowing that she does not have a blood clot. On Sunday, my mother-in-law died of a blood clot. Well, I'm not litigious. I've never been involved in a lawsuit, never sued anybody, never been sued. But obviously very upset about what had transpired. So I called a friend of mine, a lawyer, and said, I don't want an ambulance chaser. I don't want somebody to just take case. I want to know some facts. I want to know what the situation. I want to know what our rights are, what I could do, what are the possibilities. I wasn't worried about the money. What I was concerned about was, how do you stop that situation from happening to somebody else? Well, he said, well, she's over 70 years old. She's retired. She doesn't have a lot of assets. She just doesn't have any economic worth. It's not worth me taking the case. Nobody's going to take that case because there's limited economic value there. So it's a tragic situation, but there's just no legal remedy that makes any sense. You're going to have a very difficult time finding a lawyer that would take that case. And so as I thought about that, and as I was about to hang up, I said, well, is there any other advice you can give me, any other thoughts? He said, well, if you decide to pursue this, you need to go and get the medical records from that meeting last Friday at your doctor's office. He said, but don't be surprised if it's been altered. It never occurred to me. So my wife went back on Monday, asked for the medical records, said it'll be 48 hours before we can make those copies for you. Come back Wednesday. She came back Wednesday, and guess what? It was altered. It had been written over there. If you got problems, go get a Doppler advice. You're helpless. She was not a statistic. She was a mother. She was a grandmother. It wasn't about money. It was about how do you stop that from happening again. And the airlines, we find out the problems. We identify them, we correct them, we fix them. But we don't do that in the medical area. There's too many concerns about lawsuits, so it gets covered up, gets swept under the rug, and the issues happen over and over and over again. If we had 100,000 deaths from airlines, that's one airline crash a day. Do you think we'd solve the problem if we were having a headline of an airplane crash every day of a 747? Of course we would. But we don't do it with healthcare. Richard Jackson's got a proposal on trying to help get some relief to these people, but it's not the relief to the people at the low end just so you don't have a lawyer involved, you get a different system. I think there's some value there. It would be nice to have some money to help bury her properly and maybe even have a few dollars left over to help her kids or grandkids' education down the road, but that's not the important part. The important part is helping to solve the problem and expose it so we don't have that problem again in the future, so that people can deal with a more effective healthcare system that when there's a problem, somebody identifies it, they admit to it, and they correct it. And that's what I would like to see done. It's not so much about the economic value. Again, it's about the human life involved. And what Jennifer said, can you help somebody else down the road? Can you stop it from happening to another grandmother? Can you stop it from occurring so that we don't have a problem where we ignore issues because of the litigation environment we're currently in? Thanks.
Thank you, Ron. We have 2 minutes remaining, so unfortunately we're not going to probably be able to have time for questions. Grace Marie mentioned that she wants to make a quick policy point.
I do think this could be some place that Georgia could really take the lead. I mean, there was no medical liability reform whatsoever in Obamacare. And this really can be a state issue. And you've heard today how the current system, from which makes a very few trial lawyers very rich, is very harmful to people who really need compensation and need some sort of judgment to help them for justice to be done. But the other issue is the more than $600 billion a year that our system spends on defensive medicine, where doctors order the extra tests because they're afraid of the medical liability. The $60 billion is the cost of the insurance and the judgments, but 10 times that much more is spent every year on defensive medicine. And if we can come up with a different system, and I really think you should take a look at Rick Jackson's system of really helping to bring this out of this litigious current court system into a system that could become much fairer to patients and could save the health sector an enormous amount of money. This is someplace that Georgia could really take the lead.